Welcome to the Legion Outriders podcast, your source for the latest Legion news, opinion, and analysis. And now, the Outriders.
Hello, Outriders, and welcome to a special episode of the Legion Outriders podcast. I am Outrider Matt, and with me is Outrider Dan, but we're joined today by some very special guests. I am so pleased to have here in the booth with us, John, Long Gun Wookiee himself, is back, and we're very pleased to be joined by Andrew Dursum and Will Pagani of Atomic Mass Games. How's it going, everybody?
Hello. Oh, it's doing great. You know, when you guys told me that we were going to have AMG on again, I'm like, well, I got to come back out of retirement to chat with them because it's great to be able to hear from the inside, and I'm excited to be on here with you, gentlemen.
Yay!
I'm excited to be here.
So it's been almost a year since last time we had both Wills on, and we've got Will Pagani returning with us, which we're super excited about. Thanks so much, Will, for coming back. Glad we didn't scare you off last time.
Oh, it'll take more than that to scare me away.
And Andrew Dursum is joining us for the first time. Andrew, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what got you involved with Legion, what brought you to AMG, and just about your history with wargaming in general.
Yes, hi. So my name is Andrew Dursum. I'm a game developer with Atomic Mass Games. I've been with them since October of 2021. I've always been a big, passionate fan of gaming, particularly tabletop gaming and miniatures. Been doing that for about 10, 15 years, various systems. I actually was a Star Wars Armada player for a while. And then when Legion came out, that was kind of more my speed, so I started playing. And you know, it's always been a dream to work in the gaming industry, and here we are making that dream come true. So
awesome. Well, we're happy to have you on here, and we're excited to see the future of Legion with you on the helm.
I'm always curious about this, Andrew. What was the game that got you into miniature gaming in the first place?
I believe I was 13 years old, and I went over to a friend's house for a sleepover, and his mom had just gotten him like a little set of little fantasy men and orcs and stuff to paint. And so we did that, and it was all downhill from there. So
wow, started out strong painting right away.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what? Some of us get involved with the art part of it before the actual playing because they don't have friends to play with.
That seems crazy to me.
That was a self-burn, by the way, not you, Andrew. So when did you start? Did you start with Legion when it first came out?
Yes, I started playing Legion from launch. So been playing it for the life of the game. Yes.
Oh, cool. So you've kind of gone through all iterations and rode the roller coaster all the way through.
A little bit.
So oh, sorry, what was that?
Played it off and on. Yes. So.
Awesome. So with Legion now approaching its 5th year since release, and that. Just thinking back on it, I'd actually look at a calendar and make sure. Has it really been 5 years?
Has it been?
Yeah.
Yep, wow.
It has. 5 years since spring of 2018.
Jeez.
Yeah. So, in that time, the game has seen several rule shakeups, through so many different iterations. With, this being one of the biggest ones with what we're seeing just being released at the beginning of this year. What went into the decision-making process that led up to this rules release and points update?
Yeah, so... I'll take a page out of Shick's book because I think you may have talked about this last time we were on here, right? But like every game is a garden, and sometimes you have to trim and prune different plants in the garden to let the entire garden flourish. And that I think is a great analogy for what we've done here with Legion, where we've taken some portions of it that were great and hopefully made it better, and some portions of it that were a little rocky and hopefully smoothed it out a little bit. And one of the reasons we wanted to do that was, which we talked about in the articles leading up to the launch, right, is streamlining, ease of play, and really accessibility for new players and returning players and, current players, right? Like, I don't know about y'all, but whenever I'm playing a game and I have to go look up a rule in a rule book, I'm always like, dang. I have to stop playing. I have to go look up something. I don't want to do homework during my game. So hopefully some of the changes that we've made here will remove some of those situations, and hopefully it'll happen less and less. So that was sort of always the hope with it, and yeah.
Well, as somebody who's dabbled a little bit of Horus Heresy over the last year, I really appreciate that because, yeah, bookkeeping in gaming is not fun.
Yeah.
So, Andrew, with you kind of getting involved with this particular rules update, were you kind of there from the beginning of this, the meetings regarding this rules update?
Yeah, I mean, as we've said in the article, this was a project that we have been working on for some time behind the scenes, and now everyone's going to get to enjoy it soon. But was a very, time-intensive, lengthy project that I was there for the entirety of. Yes.
Yeah, I think this podcast will come out after it launches. Correct me if I'm wrong here, gentlemen.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you will already be enjoying it.
You're already being enjoying it.
But yeah, I mean, this started at least a year ago.
Yeah, I mean, easily this time last year, I was already working on this. So.
Wow.
So now, over the years, you've provided us with the rules reference guide for free online, and this living document has served as the repository for all Legion rules, keyword definitions, and errata. Understandably, it's started to become a labyrinth and difficult for new players to learn from. Now, for the first time, we actually are getting a core rulebook. How will this document be structured, and what inspired you to make these changes?
So the rulebook itself is essentially a linear learning document. So instead of an alphabetized list of terms, which the RRG was, this one is much more focused on organizing information in the order which players will sort of need it in the game and the order in which they hopefully need to learn that information. So it is less of, say, an appendix and more of like an instruction manual for how to play the game. It does, of course, have an index and all that kind of stuff still. So if you're looking for attacks, you can flip to the index. The attacks are on page, 32 or whatever. I don't know what page attacks are actually on. And then just flip straight to that. So you still have, hopefully, a lot of that ease of use that you did get out of the RRG. But also you have a place for players to learn the full game, because the Learn to Play book that is still contained in the core sets is great, and it can do a lot of work toward learning, but it doesn't give you the full picture. It doesn't give you all of everything. Yeah. And hopefully this book will give you all of everything that you need to know how to play the game in a much more digestible and readable way. So instead of it just being a reference guide, which the RRG was great for, it's more of a learning tool and a little more conversational and usable document for the average player is sort of the hope, I think.
The goal for sure was that if you do not know how to play Star Wars Legion, that you can take this core rulebook and you can read it, with your buddy or whoever, and understand how to play. You're not going to have to keep flipping forth between a reference document. That by the time you finish reading the book, you will understand the rules to play the game, and you'll be ready to go on your way. That was the goal.
Yeah. And from our perspective, we were all kind of here from day one. So we've kind of gotten all of the rules updates gradually and kind of been able to, adjust as we've gone. But for new players who are joining the game, over the last 6 months or so, they really have to rely on that community to kind of help them learn all the nuances of the game. I think this core rulebook's a great idea for those people who maybe don't have a robust community to rely on to help them learn the game. And they really have to just rely on an instructional booklet to be cohesive and, help them to escalate the learning process.
Not everybody has an Outrider Dan. They can just shoot a message to and ask questions. So having a consolidated source of all this is fantastic.
You mean they haven't found a community yet?
Yet.
Yeah.
Time to build one.
Started their community.
Exactly.
Yes. There we go.
But I mean, having resources like the Discord, Legion Discord, having Facebook, things like that, and thankfully having a communicative AMG team who is helping to get those rules out there. Thank you, LJ. Big shout out.
Yeah.
That helps a lot too. But the core rulebook's a phenomenal idea. So one big thing that I know from the beginning of the game has helped to, those people coming in from Games Workshop's games that aren't turn-based, maybe a little bit of a learning curve, is activation counts. It's one thing that's been a huge factor in the list building process for Star Wars Legion since day one. How many low activation count lists have done well on the tournament scene? While many of the low activation counts have done well on the tournament scene so far, it's often seen as an advantage to out-activate your opponent. With the rules update, we're seeing the introduction of the pass mechanic for the first time. Tell us a little bit about how this addition will work And how do you think this mechanic will affect the balance of activation count valuation?
So how it works is pretty simple. If your opponent has more activations than you at any point during the round, you can choose to pass once per round. And there's fancy word language for like, how do you count how many activations there are? Well, it's just how many activations they have. Like if you're just learning about this conversationally, that's really all you need to know about it. And then a pass is just a skipped turn. You don't activate any of your units. Nobody gets an order. You just chill. I don't know, Dursum, do you have anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just the kind of the goal was, right, like, yes, having more activations is an advantage. And it's an advantage that throughout the playtesting process, we decided that we didn't want to completely eliminate, but we wanted to curb a little bit. So, a 6 activation list against a 13 activation list, well, the pass mechanic isn't really going to help you there, right? But maybe a 9 activation list against an 11 activation list, oh, okay, maybe that'll be enough to kind of even the playing field a little bit. And we just really wanted to prevent these situations where, through one player maybe activating like filler units or, naked core units to kind of bide their time and force their opponent to activate a really expensive unit and kind of be forced to, make a maneuver that they don't want to, or kind of walk into the other armies, range weapons. That was kind of the things we were wanting to avoid, kind of get rid of those feels bad situations and curb the advantage a little bit, but not completely eliminate it.
And I think one of the important things to note on it, right, is we want to open up what's available for players to use, right? We have all these great units out there. We have all these cool characters. We have all these awesome things. And if players feel like they can't use those things because they're suboptimal or they have to get more activations to really be able to compete in the game, like, that's not cool. I want to see the Darth Vader.
Yeah.
I want to see the Luke Skywalkers. I want to see the Boba Fett's, right? Like, show me these cool characters and these cool moments in Star Wars that we're here for, right? Like, we're here to play Legion because the game is great and Star Wars is great and we love all of those things. Show me those things. So anytime that we run into a situation where a player is like, oh man, I can't do XYZ, which would be really cool because I need another activation, like, that to me is not a great thing. And we need to figure out a way to remove that and give that player that freedom and that agency to do the cool thing, hopefully.
So what was the list that kind of spawned that change, and why was it triple stab 14 activation droids?
I don't even think it was so much the high activation lists that really informed this decision, right? It was more the low activation lists where we're like, oh man, it would be so cool if you could really play like Palpatine and a bunch of Royal Guards and like all these other expensive troops. Like, oh, well, you only get 8 activations. Well, that's going to be rough.
Yeah.
Or you only get 7 activate. Like, okay, well, how can we help them out a little bit? What can we do to make a list like this a little bit more viable? Like, it doesn't even need to be like, this is the new meta. This is the new way to play, right? Like, that's not really what we're looking for. We're saying, hey, how can we take something that's currently not very playable and make it playable through a relatively simple change that opens up a lot of space for players to explore, right? So I don't even think, once again, it was the high activation lists. It's more the low ones that we were trying to help with this.
Hopefully there's some clone players out there, they're saying to themselves, oh, maybe instead of taking, 2 phase 1 units with no upgrades, like maybe I can afford to, take an ARC Trooper unit now, or some other unit that beforehand it's like, oh, I don't have a lot of activations. Do I really want to, do this? Maybe now they'll be able, they'll feel like more comfortable doing that is the goal. So.
Did you always initially just want to go with the 1 pass per round, or was there a talk about doing more than that?
Oh, we tried all sorts of crazy things. Yeah, we did all sorts of things, and this was sort of the one that panned out to be the easiest to understand, which I think is really important, right? We talked a lot about like accessibility to the game, hopefully making this less sort of archaic and convoluted for players. And we had some things that were like, well, if you take the number of activations you start with in the round and then you divide by 2, like no, we don't need to do any of this, right? Just, do you have less? Yes, you can pass. And the once per round worked out because we tried the you can pass as many times as you want, as Dursum mentioned earlier. And then it was just like, oh my gosh, now characters, like the Rebel lists with 3 or 4 characters, and we're just like, oh my gosh, they can do anything they want. They're invincible. So like that didn't work. So then we ended up at the 1, and yeah, we had all sorts of wacky things.
Yeah.
Yeah, as somebody who always enjoyed playing the Falcon crew list with the Rebels, that's good news.
Yeah, and maybe it went a little too far when it was all the passes, but I think 1 is really the correct place to be, right? Like, it's a bump, it's not a huge swing, and hopefully it feels good to players to be like, okay, I have this, I gotta wait 1 turn here, right? So
Yeah, I just wanted to real quick give a shout out to all of our external playtesters for everything that they do. They were an immense help throughout this process, and like Pagani was saying, we threw many wacky ideas at them over the course of creating this core rulebook. So their hard work is very much appreciated.
Speaking of the playtesters, like how long ago did playtesting begin with this particular rule set?
cool. I don't know for sure, but I mean, a long time, right? We were working on it internally at least a year ago. I wouldn't be surprised if playtest has been at least a year as well, maybe a little less, but
Okay.
long time.
So there's a lot of other really important rules, changes, updates, and tweaks that have been made. So we'll move on to the next one. In the preview article, you talked about the intention to bring clarity and consistency to the rules for Legion. One of the biggest, most hotly debated rules interactions that I think I've seen since the beginning of the game has centered around line of sight, cover, and terrain interactions.
Yeah, I mean, we went to a simplified line of sight system. Essentially, unit or miniatures are cylinders. If I can draw a line from part of my cylinder to part of your cylinder, I can see you. If any line drawn from my cylinder to your cylinder goes through cover, you have cover. And that's pretty simple. I mean, there are, of course, corner cases and things like that are complicated. Line of sight systems in miniatures games are always complicated. But at its core, that's really the basis of the line of sight system change that was made. And we found that it did a lot of things for the game. It sped up the game significantly. You're no longer looking for tiny little peepholes to see things or not be seen through. You're no longer... I guess part of this is also the wound allocation rules, right? You're no longer attempting to snipe out heavy weapons or specific characters and units and things like that. So it really just sped up the game because it became very easy. 2, it became... I guess easy from a player perspective, and then 2, you get a lot more line of sight now, which is cool because you get to do more stuff, and then cover is much easier to get now, so that like stops all of the little finicky movements and things like that players were having to do to make sure that, like, does this terrain provide cover, how many people are in it, like all that kind of stuff. So the goal here was obviously to simplify, but also to hopefully reduce sort of the finicky nature of movement, which ties also into the movement change for the movement template, which I imagine we'll get to here in a little bit. But
yeah, and I think something that Pagani didn't mention is part of that making it simpler is before the core rulebook, if you were a small base trooper unit, obviously you have the silhouette template. But if you were not a small base trooper unit, where do I draw a line of sight from on my silhouette? Well, certain miniatures have, predefined points. Is it this part of the hull? Is it this part of the miniature's, body or whatever? And that is just not consistent and is very tedious to, one, remember, and also have to look up or determine in the process of the game. So by going to any part of, the silhouette or cylinder, to any part of the other silhouette, that speeds up that process quite dramatically. And so now, if you're a small base trooper unit, you've got the one silhouette. If you're a notch based unit, you have the other silhouette, and then vehicles just have their own silhouette as well. So it speeds up that part of the game quite significantly.
And we'll probably see less laser pointers at tournaments, which is always a good thing.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, as Pagani was saying,
Maybe.
the goal is to make some of that kind of finicky miniature placement matter a little bit less. Like, you don't have to worry anymore, oh, is my DLT going to get sniped out of my stormtrooper unit because I accidentally placed it in such a way that it's going to be the only miniature visible, and so that's the only one that's going to have wounds allocated to it. So hopefully, players can spend more time, playing the game and less time, having to do finicky miniature placement like that.
Yeah, I mean, other things like the models moving freely over terrain less than the height, not less than half the height. I mean, that's nice. You're not having to do any kind of crazy measurements or anything. They're definitely like nice quality of life adjustments.
yeah, and so anything we can do to promote people moving around the table, I think, is a win. So little less rough terrain, little less things you have to move slower over, can move over. Movement on the table, I think, is a very important aspect of pretty much all miniature gaming. So anything that we can do to get people really doing that, I think, is great.
So another big change that we're seeing is regarding panic and suppression. In the preview articles, you mentioned that panic and suppression, you didn't feel they were impactful enough in scenario play. Now, are the changes to panic and suppression intended to be only used for scenario play, or are these also to be applied to standard and competitive games of Star Wars Legion?
Oh, no, definitely. When we say scenario play, we mean this, like, the mission cards in Legion. Like, because that is the scenario that you have built through the battle deck, right? So it's definitely standard Legion, everything good to go there.
Do you ever think that we'll see a time where suppression lists are anything more than just a meme list?
I mean, never say never. Maybe.
I think certainly. I mean, the ability to, panic a unit and prevent it from scoring is, quite strong. And so, I think we will see players maybe, taking more, weapons with the suppressive keyword, in their lists going forward.
So since the last points update, we've seen a drastically different meta emerge. The Kashyyyk wave was just releasing at the time, and the Shadow Collective units were still in development. The beginning of 2022 was dominated by Ion Spider droids and Magna Guard, and since the release of the Shadow Collective, it seems like Pikes have been fighting on every battlefield across the entire universe. How much did you factor in the tournament results and player feedback when you did the points updates that we've seen?
Yeah, I mean, we're always looking at stuff like that. We do sort of snoop around, I guess might be the best phrase, but we hang out in the Discords and the Facebook groups and stuff like that, and we see what people are talking about, and we check out the tournament results and all that kind of stuff. We also do a lot of stuff like talking to people that play Legion. Who do we run into at conventions? Who's at our local game stores playing? What do they think is going on? So it's not just tournament results. It's really, we try to get a feel on the entire community and what is going on there. And then, of course, we also have our playtesters that we talk to and we listen to, and what we feel is going on as well. It's all very important in informing points updates. So, yeah. We try to pull as much information as we can from as many different places.
But sometimes when you nerf what might seem like an overpowered faction, the pendulum can sometimes swing a little too far in the other direction.
Certainly.
Some people may have said that with the Rexstar list that we saw, that, it's seeing a ton of success in competitive play in 2021, and, a rules update comes in and it maybe becomes a little bit underpowered, seemingly. How do you, go into making sure that you don't have that happen when doing these points updates?
Yeah, I mean, that's just playtest and playtest, right? How many games can you get in? How much can you see? How accurate is your playtest? So I think all of that is process stuff.
Specifically with regards to what we saw with the Galactic Republic, you guys did a lot to kind of improve Phase 2s and arcs. Do you think maybe we found that sweet spot with Republic?
I mean, I don't know if you ever find the perfect sweet spot, but we'll be paying attention to see how it goes. We do like the direction that they're moving in. And I think the rules updates, as Dursum talked about it a little bit earlier with passing and things like that, hopefully help them out a little bit. So we won't see the full impact of that points update until people really dig into the new rules and see exactly what's going on with that stuff. So.
Andrew, what are some of the biggest changes you've seen with the points updates that you're excited about? Like, what are the units that are you're having a lot of fun play testing?
Oh gosh. I mean, as we were just saying, I'm definitely excited to see people, tinker around with their Republic armies. I know for a long time competitively, it seemed like, the only way sometimes they can compete was with a heavy helping of Wookiees in there. So maybe we'll see more clones in the actual clone army. But yeah, I mean, I'm just excited for people to, see the update and, try to, make new armies with it. As Pagani said earlier, a lot of what we do is trying to open up space for people to take units, we want people to think that they have choices and what they take for their armies, and that they're not pigeonholed into one choice that seems the most optimal or staple to a card. That's one of the reasons why we raised some of the points on the generic upgrades, because some of those we were seeing that players, certain units had obvious choices for an upgrade. Vigilance is kind of a great example. It's oh well, I'm going to have a lot of dodge stuff in my army. Well, I'm going to take vigilance, right? And so hopefully by raising the points cost on some of those upgrades, it kind of creates more of a choice with players. Oh well, maybe I'm going to take this instead. It's not such an obvious choice, and it opens up some space for some more interesting combinations.
Yeah, I mean, speaking about some of those upgrades, we saw some points increases to stuff like offensive push, tenacity, situational awareness, up close and personal. Those all tend to be upgrades that are seen from, more melee-focused units. Was there a concerted effort to kind of dial back the melee focus, or armies that like to play aggressively, to maybe even the playing field with some of the ranged units?
I wouldn't say so, no. In fact, I think I'm actually quite interested to see. We found in our internal external playtesting that with these new rules, that melee armies actually get a bit of a bump, because with the new climb rules, it's actually a little bit easier for them to traverse the battlefield. So if there's that building that's between you and a unit that you want to engage in melee, you don't have to run around it anymore. You can just climb over it. And so with the new movement rules, it makes it a little bit easier for those melee armies to close and engage. So we're quite interested to see how that plays out in the wild.
Can you kind of walk us through some of those changes to those units that have scale? As we are airing this episode after the rules book has dropped, obviously those rules have been spoiled for everyone, but I don't think we're privy to all that information yet.
Yeah, so obviously when we change the climb rules and Climber no longer exists, obviously that means we're going to have to rework Expert Climber and Scale. Those keywords have been reworked entirely. Expert Climber now lets you move up to height 2 when you perform a climb, and Scale is just Expert Climber plus Unhindered. So now you ignore difficult terrain, and you also have the Expert Climber keyword. Is how those keywords got reworked.
Nice.
Okay. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. Despite new releases and exciting upcoming units and battle forces, that there's those who are worried that what the future might hold for Legion. The rules update should clear up any of that confusion, but what would you like to say about the growth and direction you envision for the game in the years to come?
I can kind of take this one. There is so much coming for Legion that when you asked Dursum, like, what are you playing in playtest right now that you get excited about? I was like,
I can't really
I'm excited about. Nope.
No.
So, there's so much coming for Legion. We have so many units in development. We have so many battle forces. We have so much stuff. So many like narrative event kits. So many store support kits. Right. I know that's a new thing that's on its way as well from Atomic Mass Games. So, support of the game has never been bigger, and the future is bright and exciting from my perspective anyway. I would hope you all share that perspective, but there's a lot to come. A lot to come.
I mean, can I say I'm excited for Ewoks? Is that fair?
Yeah.
And murder bears.
I would be, as somebody who's extremely excited about Ewoks, I'd be very disappointed if you weren't excited about that.
I'm very excited about Ewoks. I'm gonna get one of those like Ewok flannel shirts with like Wicked's face all over it. It's gonna be great. So we wear that on stream. It'll be fantastic.
It'll be 700 degrees in that stream studio. He's still gonna wear his flannel.
And it's gonna look great. It's gonna look great.
I mean, you're based in the Pacific Northwest. It's kind of like the de facto uniform, right?
It is my uniform, yes.
Nice. Awesome. Did you guys have anything else you wanted to add, or anything else you were excited to talk about?
I mean, I have so many things I'm excited about, but I don't think I just want to say, like, looking forward to the development of Legion, like looking forward into the future, right? Atomic Mass Games has sort of a mission statement or a dedication to creating very thematic and flavorful characters and units. And if you look at sort of what's been going on with our recent releases, like The Mandalorian, like Grogu, like I guess at this point, by the time this comes out, it will be very close to Moff Gideon and Dark Troopers. Those very unique feeling units is something that we love to make. So like getting as much flavor and as much feel into every unit is something that we really focus on when we're doing development. So get ready and hold on to your butts, I guess. We're going to get some exciting stuff coming. And yeah, there's going to be a lot of new and a lot of interesting and a lot of different.
Cool. Last second questions. Dan, you got anything?
I don't know if I'm allowed to ask this, but
I'll cut it if you're not.
Okay, who came up with the name Myrtleizer?
Damn, I was going to ask that.
I believe that name was given to us from Lucasfilm.
Really?
See? They don't do anything without naming it all.
We were curious if this was something that was generated by AMG, just as FFG in the past
No,
actually was given the ability to make things.
No.
Yeah. Because I was thinking to myself, I'm like, that had to clear Lucasfilm licensing at one point.
I believe its origin is actually Lucasfilm specifically. So.
Oh, gee.
There you go.
All right.
Excellent.
Thank you for clearing that up.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the people needed to know.
Yes.
Like, I don't know
Anyways,
if I anything up, but...
Well, Andrew and Will, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate this. We're excited to dig into the new rules update and get our first games in with these new rules.
Yeah, well, thank you for having us. It's been a blast.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Well, that's going to do it for this very special episode of the Legion Outriders podcast. Thank you again to Andrew Dursum and Will Pagani for joining us on the show. We'll be returning to our normal schedule on the next episode, and we hope to see you there. Don't forget, you can email us at legionoutriders@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook under the same name, or you can find Outrider Dan on Discord, or catch one of my Twitch streams at twitch.tv/captain_archer. See you next time, Outriders.
This concludes the current episode of the Legion Outriders podcast. You may cultivate a tactical advantage by observing the Outriders on Facebook or Twitter at Legion Outriders. Wisdom advocates subscribing to the podcast. Acting otherwise is reckless.